it really is just a moral question. At what point that kind of fetus has rights, and at what point does the rights of the fetus outweigh the rights of the person carrying?
My name is Nick Nagaka and you are locked into Culture TV. For the culture, by the culture. Let's go.
Sam, thank you so much for coming down today.
Hi, nice to meet you. It's good to be here.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right, you know. So I think we thought it'd be really good to chat to someone like yourself with there being so much in the press about abortion at the moment. It's definitely a relevant subject and something that I think a lot more light can be shed on. So you work for a company called BPAS, which is the British Pregnancy Advisory Service. Yeah, I got it right. Tell me a bit about that then.
Yeah, so we're actually a charity and an abortion provider. So we see over 100,000 women and pregnant people a year.
Yeah.
We advise on pregnancy choices. So if someone's pregnant and they're not sure what they're doing, we provide counselling. Yeah. Obviously, we provide abortion services that are from the NHS. We're also opening up a fertility centre this year. So we'll be expanding into like IVF and preserving fertility for trans patients before they medically transition. And we also have the Centre for Reproductive Research. So we do a lot of research and kind of studies into reproductive and sexual health as well.
Right, okay. So I'm sure you're going to be a bit more clued up on this than me. We're seeing a lot in the news about what's happening in Texas. Can you explain what the Texas abortion laws are?
So it is a little bit complicated.
Okay.
Essentially, it hasn't been outright banned. It's not legally passed to say that you cannot access abortion. But what it is that anyone who has helped someone get an abortion over 6 weeks gestation can be sued by a private citizen for up to £10,000.
Okay.
So that's anyone including the person who got the abortion, their partner, any nurses or doctors involved, even the Uber driver who took them there can be fined for up to £10,000.
For assisting in that process?
Yeah. So it's essentially like a bit of a bounty hunter.
That's a strange way of going about it.
It is. I don't think they were able to fully outlaw it, so they kind of found a way around it that puts the onus on private citizens. But that's a huge amount, so it could really bankrupt some people.
Yeah. And when does that's come into effect now, hasn't it? I believe.
Yeah.
Was it like yesterday or something like that?
I think it was a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Was it a couple of weeks ago?
Yeah,
okay.
when it came out.
So clearly they're very non-pro-choice, but in the UK it's quite a pro-choice system, I suppose, and in Northern Ireland, but it's different in Southern Ireland. Is that correct?
So I know more about Northern Ireland because it's part of the UK.
Yeah.
But it's still two different systems there. So
okay.
The original legislation was I can't remember what it's called. The original legislation was Acts Against the Person.
Yeah.
And that was from, I think it's 1860 something. It was literally from Queen Victoria that outlawed abortion originally. And then we got the Abortion Act in 1967, which allowed abortion in England, Scotland and Wales under a specific set of circumstances. Yeah. It still has to be signed off by two doctors to be legal. There's a lot of kind of legal clauses to get in it. In Northern Ireland, the Abortion Act was not extended to them. So they've literally only had access to legal abortion services in 2020. Before that, they would have to travel or they would have to procure abortion pills from the internet and risk kind of imprisonment or fines.
Abortion pills from the internet?
Yeah.
That sounds dodgy, doesn't it?
It does in some cases. It is dodgy, but there are providers who will provide safe stuff, like Women on Web, who provide abortion pills to people in Northern Ireland, or have done recently until it was made legal. So although it's legal in Northern Ireland now, the issue is actually commissioning services. So a lot of services aren't commissioned, or they aren't given the kind of funding and infrastructure that's needed to provide abortion services long term.
Yeah.
So a lot of them might set up and start running,
Yeah.
and then they close.
Yeah.
So we're still seeing a lot of people from Northern Ireland who either have to travel quite long distances within their country, or they have to come over to England or Wales to get abortions,
Yeah.
or they're getting the pills online.
I think it's crazy that a government or a political body can have a say in what a human being does with their body. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whether that is in terms of abortion or anything. I think it's crazy that we have a system that even in this day and age in 2021 allows that. So you're saying that Queen Victoria 1867 passed that initial law to outlaw abortion?
Yeah, the Offences Against the Person Act. So we're still working with legislation that's, what, about 150, 160 years old now?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's completely outdated. It's not fit for purpose.
Yeah.
Even the Abortion Act of 67.
Tell me about that. What does that say?
So legally, you have to have it signed off by 2 doctors. Until March last year, with the coronavirus pandemic, you could only have your treatment in clinic. So if you're getting a surgical one, it's going to be in clinic.
Yeah.
But medical abortions, you had to go and be seen in clinic. You'd have to have your scan.
Yeah.
You would take the first pills there. And recently, it was legislated that you could take the second set of pills at home, which would really induce the abortion.
Right.
So that it's a more comfortable experience. So previously, if you were taking both sets of pills in the clinic, you might start bleeding on the way home. You might start to kind of lose pregnancy products on the way home. It's painful, awkward, embarrassing. But now you can take them at home. And the more recent shift has allowed people to take both sets of pills at home. So it's telemedicine now, which means that you can basically call up, have your consultation over the phone. They'll try and figure out how far along you are from when the date of your last period was. And as long as it's within the legal limit, you can have the whole experience in the comfort of your own home, which is to protect you from the pandemic and obviously make it a lot easier, especially for people who are vulnerable. So if you're in a domestic abuse situation, it's obviously a lot more comfortable to take it at home than to have to find an excuse to leave the house and have those hours away from home and a partner who might be watching and controlling
it's
what
an
you're
ordeal
doing.
as well, isn't it? I mean, it's not a nice experience to go through it, is it?
It's not the best experience, no. I think we kind of try and steer away from saying, this is the worst thing that can ever happen, because I think it's 1 in 3 women by the age of 45 will have had an abortion here. So it's like a pretty common experience. For some people, it might be really traumatic and really horrible, but for others, it's going to be quite run-of-the-mill.
Yeah. I suppose it depends on the circumstances around the pregnancy, the reasons why they don't want to keep a child, or can't keep a child, or whatever the scenario is. I suppose all of those things will play a factor into the experience that individual goes through when making that decision, I suppose. But at what point is your advice to not have an abortion? Like, at what point in the length of the pregnancy does it? Because I suppose there is a case of, at what point does the fetus become a human? Do you know what I mean? At what point in that timeline would you say would your advice as BPAS be to, like, okay, I think you've gone too far now with the pregnancy, it's too late to have an abortion?
That's what a lot of the kind of legislation is based around. At what point does this fetus have kind of more rights than the person carrying it? So legally, you can't have an abortion in this country after 24 weeks unless it's for like very serious reasons, if it's a risk to the mother's life or to the fetus's life. So it would be in cases of serious, like, fatal fetal anomalies, things like anencephaly, where the skull hasn't formed properly, so the baby will either die in the womb or shortly after birth. And it's things like that I don't think a lot of legislation takes into account when it's very anti-choice. When it's like, actually, a lot of people are getting abortions because, not just because their lives might not be ready for that child, but also because their life might be at risk. The life of the baby might be at risk, and that's very traumatic to still have to carry a child that you know is going to die. That's not something that I think anyone should have to deal with.
So that is not excluded from the legislation. So you'd still have to carry that child even if they
in the UK we have exceptions for things like that. But when you're looking at places like Texas,
There's no exception for it.
there's no exceptions. There's
Wow.
no exceptions for rape, for incest. The
Really?
only exception I know of in that law is that if someone has been raped, they cannot be sued by the person that's raped them for having the abortion. Yeah, that look of confusion's right.
That's insane. Wait a minute. Sorry. So, if you are raped, person X rapes person Y, for example, this person who then says, right, you need to have this baby aborted, is legally free to push that person to have the abortion. But in a normal scenario where someone has got pregnant and it's the wrong decision for them to keep the child, say the couple decide together that they don't want to keep the child, the person making that decision with the other person would then be liable to be sued. Have I not explained that very well, have I?
No, you haven't.
Okay. Right. So in which case, what I mean is the rapist is free of charge to push his victim into an abortion, whereas a consensual pregnancy that has resulted in deciding to not continue with it is illegal. Is that what you're saying, basically?
Almost, yeah, about that. So it's not that they're like free of charge to push someone into an abortion, but they can't sue the person for having an abortion. That's the only time that that person who's had one can't be sued by that specific person. But I think other people might still be able to.
Right.
Yeah, it's nuts.
That is nuts. That makes absolutely no sense at all.
No. And especially
But just like, why? Who came up with that?
Anti-choicers, people who want to control women's bodies.
And is that a religious reason why they're anti-choice over there?
Yeah, definitely in Texas. It's in the Bible Belt. It's a very religious state. And I think that's where a lot of the conversation from like fetal rights and the kind of conception and that sort of thing, like, does life begin at conception? That's where that comes from in that state.
What does science say?
Do you have a more specific question on that? Because I don't know if I can answer what science says.
I mean, like, at what point? When I say what does science say, I mean, what would the data suggest? Say that at this point, it stops becoming a fetus, it becomes an unborn human who can feel pain, who is aware, and who would essentially be killed by an abortion. At what point in the pregnancy does that, because a fetus essentially, I mean, like, a fetus is, it's an organism at this point, isn't it? It's not necessarily...
So a fetus is a baby, but until that point it's an embryo.
Right, okay, sorry, an embryo. So,
but scientifically I don't think it's really a scientific question. It really is just a moral question. At what point that kind of fetus has rights, and at what point does the rights of the fetus outweigh the rights of the person carrying it?
Yeah. Where do you stand on that?
I think it's always going to be the right of the person carrying it.
Okay. Even in like the third trimester?
That's a pretty sticky situation. It's only going to be legal in under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
And I think it's always going to be a personal decision.
Yeah. I think where I would stand on it would be that I think in the scenarios that you painted to me of a baby that would be born, die soon after, or be born into a lot of pain and then death, or that could put a lot of risk to the mother, I think in that case, at any point during a pregnancy, I think the woman should have the right to take charge of that situation, and no one should ever be allowed to intervene within that. I can understand. I am a pro-choicer. I believe that women should have the right to do whatever they want with their bodies. But I would be lying if I didn't say that I would be unsure about at what point, where my moral ground would be, at what point does that become a baby and not a feet. And then, do you know what I mean? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, after 6 months, 24 weeks, you can't legally kind of access abortions for like, just because you've changed your mind.
Yeah.
And it would be surgical after that point anyway, which is kind of, there's some restrictions around that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think another scenario that I think should be considered carefully as well is when a woman who is being reckless with her body regularly and having abortions on a regular basis because she won't use contraception or something like that, where they've had, you know, I heard of a woman who'd had like abortions in the 20s, like more than 20 abortions. Now, at what point is it like, this needs to stop? Like, you can't, it's not good for her. It can't be good for her having an abortion over and over 20 times.
Multiple abortions don't affect your fertility.
Do they not?
No, there's no evidence of that.
Would it not damage your body though at some point?
No, it's completely safe.
So what actually happens when you have an abortion? What's the actual physical process?
It depends whether you're having surgical or medical and at what point, because there's different kinds of surgical abortion.
Okay.
If I speak from my own experience, so medical abortion will be 2 sets of pills. So you'll take the first ones and they start to, they kind of end the pregnancy. So, you know, there's not like the nutrients going to it, the baby stops growing. And then the second set of pills brings on like a labour. So you'll start to lose the pregnancy. You'll bleed. Eventually you will like kind of have to deal with the pregnancy coming out of you. And however you figure out with that. Surgical abortions, you can have like local general anesthetic, you can be sedated but still awake. And they will generally vacuum it out.
Right. And what sort, are they painless experiences, or does it just vary on the individual?
I think it varies. I wouldn't say it's painless. I think anyone that's having an abortion should be prepared with painkillers and like a hot water bottle. Usually it's not going to be much worse than like bad period pains. If it is, then someone should definitely kind of seek some advice from the health services. It's quite a straightforward experience usually. Right.
So when you're dealing with like, say, a woman who's come into your practice and they're conflicted about whether they should keep the child or have an abortion, how do you as an agency and as a charity approach a situation like that?
So we have a lot of safeguarding procedures in place. So if someone's unsure, first and foremost, we won't be proceeding on the day. We need someone to be sure of their decision. We can direct them to our counselling services. So it's just a pregnancy counselling. We won't say you should do this or you should do that. We'll simply talk it through with them. Any concerns they might have either way.
Discuss the facts, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Just so they've got like an outside point of view that will help them figure out what they want to do, what the right choice is. But we will make sure that no one's kind of pressuring them, that they're not at risk of any kind of violence or coercion to either have an abortion or not have one. But ultimately, the decision is always going to be up to the person themselves.
And it is a difficult decision, I suppose, for many people. But I think more awareness, I think, because there's so much stigma from both sides of the argument, I think, attached to this subject, I think then ultimately it's the woman who will suffer in that scenario. Do you know what I mean? Because they may be conflicted because of what they're seeing in the news or what they're seeing online about abortion. And also, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to get you on here, is to sort of explain how that process can work, and that if the decision that you make is that you don't want to continue with a pregnancy, it can be carried out safely in a way that you will be comfortable. You won't be made to feel like a baby killer or whatever the people are throwing around online. And I think that's the sort of messaging that kind of needs to hit home really on this subject. How long have you been working in this field for?
A few years on and off. So I worked with the sexual health charity FPA originally, and I've done quite a lot of
What's that?
So they're no longer running. They were the UK's longest running sexual health charity. So it was the Family Planning Association. And they worked on a lot of kind of sexual and reproductive health. Their Northern Ireland branch is now Informing Choices Northern Ireland. So they work specifically on providing abortion services in Northern Ireland. When that closed, I kind of took on a bit of a baton myself and did a lot of advocacy work in the media talking about my abortion experience because of the kind of shame and stigma that we see around those conversations usually.
Yeah. Did you feel that?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I've been called a murderer.
Have you?
Yeah.
Really?
By multiple people.
For having an abortion? That's crazy.
Yeah. And I think there's a very specific type of stigma that comes with having had more than one abortion as well. When you have your first one, then people might be like, oh, people make mistakes, you know, things happen, you can't always plan. The second time, it's kind of like, well, you're a bit of an idiot, aren't you? Like, why didn't you learn from the first experience? Why didn't you put something in place? But you can't, there's always going to be something, there's always going to be some way that it happens. You can't plan for every single eventuality.
No, you can, you heck.
No, and especially because your reproductive age can be anything from like 13 to like 45.
Yeah.
That's quite a long time. That's a lot of opportunity to get pregnant.
Yeah, it is. Twice as well, easily.
Yeah, exactly.
Easily, yeah.
But I think there's quite a lack in conversation about that actually.
Yeah. So how did that make you feel when you were called those sorts of things?
It really hurts.
Really?
I think it's fine when you kind of get it from the anti-choice lobby and people that don't know you, but when it's like more personal directly, that's really painful.
Really?
That sucks, yeah. Especially when it's people that kind of really know and understand the situations that you've been in.
Yeah. So was it people who you know who would talk to you like that?
One was actually a therapist.
What?
Yeah.
Someone you were paying?
I had to pay her £60 to call me a murderer, you know.
Wow.
Yeah.
So wait a minute, how did she say, so you're sat there on the couch with a box of tissues on the table telling her about how you're feeling about going through a traumatic experience, and what did she say exactly?
That I shouldn't tell anyone else about it, that I'd had my opportunities for children and I killed my 2 babies, and that, I was generally a bad person and I should keep it a secret. Which is why I decided not to keep it a secret.
Wow. That is great. And has she still got a job?
I expect so, yeah.
Wow. A therapist?
I do want to say that not all therapists are like that.
No, of course
and you're
not.
especially not going to find that from BPAS counselling services.
You just got a bad egg.
Yeah, a very bad egg.
No, of course not. But that is crazy to think that in that scenario, someone could be that insensitive to say that.
Yeah.
That's crazy. That she can even bring her personal opinion to it. Because as a therapist, you're supposed to stay fairly neutral, aren't you?
Yeah, I feel like you should be detached from it.
Yeah. Wow. So how did you deal with that then?
Cried a lot.
Yeah.
I've been quite public about my abortion experiences, and I've actually, the overwhelming experience has been positive. Like a lot of people, because I've been public about what I went through, have then chosen to come to me either when they're considering it or when they're pregnant and they're not sure what to do.
Yeah.
And they're afraid. And I think that is really valuable. I think the most important thing that I could have experienced was having like support from other women, like that community, other people that have talked me through it and told me this is what you can expect, this is what might happen.
Yeah.
This is, you know, the issues you might encounter, how you might feel about it.
Yeah.
That has been the most helpful thing.
Yeah. So what would be your advice? Let's say there's someone watching this now who's pregnant, they don't really know what to do, they're not sure if they want to keep it or if they want to have it go through with an abortion. What would be your advice to someone like that?
I think definitely talking to people you know are safe to talk to, because not everyone's gonna
Judge.
Yeah, some people are gonna be judgmental, and seek out the people that aren't gonna be judgmental in your life. Talk openly and honestly about what your fears are, whether it's your fears about raising a child or your fears about abortion. See if you know anyone, because I bet you all know people. You will absolutely know people who have gone through it, or you will have a friend of a friend who can talk you through the process. And just prepare as much as you can, find as much information as you can, make use of all the services available to you. Definitely get counselling, because emotionally, your hormones are going to be going crazy because you're pregnant.
Yeah.
Your body's changing. It's quite a difficult experience being pregnant and not being able to celebrate it, because you're always told that that's the ideal experience.
Yeah.
So when you're not sure about it, it's quite difficult to know what to do with those feelings. But just talk about it and seek other people's advice and experiences as much as you can.
And is BPAS just centred in London, or is that available?
BPAS is across the UK, yeah.
Is it? So they can find a BPAS centre?
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty much anywhere.
Find us online, call up for a chat. Yeah, there will be someone that can help you out.
So Sam, tell me a bit more about telemedicine.
Sure. So telemedicine was only introduced in March of last year due to the pandemic.
Right. So what exactly is telemedicine?
So it's all done over the phone. It's pills by post, essentially. So if you are pregnant, you can call up, have some counselling sessions.
Over the phone?
Yeah, and a consultation over the phone with BPAS. And if you are eligible, so if you're eligible for medical abortion before, I think it's 9 weeks, you can receive your pills by post. So this is only a temporary measure at the moment. MPs,
how do they check if you are up to 9 weeks pregnant without being consulted?
It will be based on the phone consultation. So they'll ask when the last date of your period was and things like that, to figure out how far along you might be. Generally, we make quite a good estimate on it because most people will realise that about kind of 6-7 weeks from their first, from when they've they've just missed their period. That's when they'll know. And you can have your abortion completely in the comfort of your own home. You'll be sent the pills. We'll kind of do follow-up checks and stuff like that. But ministers they've had a consultation. The consultation is now closed as to whether to make it a permanent aspect of abortion care, but they might revoke it. And if it's revoked, that means that they are effectively recriminalising at-home abortions.
Really?
Yeah, so legally...
So wait a minute, was it criminal? Go on, I'm putting in here, go on.
Well, legally, if you had an abortion at home, you could either face like a big fine or you could be sentenced to life in prison under the Abortion Act, which is why it's not fit for purpose.
Is that the original Queen
That's
Victoria
the 1967 one?
The 1967 one?
Yeah.
You get life?
It's legislated that it has to be signed off by 2 doctors and it has to be done in a clinic. So because
with
it's
a maximum sentence of life imprisonment?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's not fit for purpose.
At all. But it's really important that we keep pills by post, especially because it's so difficult for some people to access it. If they're in a rural area and it's like 2 hours to their nearest clinic, that's not...
And also, like, there may be people living in certain situations with a partner they don't particularly want to be with, or a domestic violence situation, or in certain religious background, women can't get out of the house in the same way, and they may have to do this almost in secret. Do you know what I mean? While they repair their situation or try and... So to take that away puts a large group of people in a more vulnerable situation.
Yeah, and with the introduction of telemedicine, we've actually seen it's become much safer and much more efficient because it happens at an earlier gestation. So with telemedicine, it generally happens around 6 to 7 weeks.
Well, they're going to jump on it straight away when they realise where they're at, because otherwise you're booking with a doctor, that takes 2 weeks, so that's another 2 weeks down the pregnancy.
Yeah, basically, it cuts out a lot of the middleman.
And it's another week to get into another clinic. It's like, it cuts out a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So they need to keep that in, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah, it's really important.
Are you guys advocating hard for that at the moment?
Yeah, it's a big part of our abortion provision at the moment. Most people are having telemedical abortions. I think it's something like 89% of people.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's really took off then and that's just since the pandemic?
Yeah, because it was to protect people against getting the virus, and we were also struggling to provide them because our staff members were getting the virus, so they couldn't be there, whether they were having to isolate or they were sick themselves. We couldn't provide it whilst we were dealing with this virus.
Right.
So it was a solution to that.
So at what point during the pandemic did that come into play?
That was March 2022. That was March 2020, and
so they came quick with it then.
Kind of. They U-turned on it initially. So initially they said they weren't going to provide it.
Right.
Then they put up a statement on their website that said, yes, we're going ahead with telemedicine.
Yeah.
Then they said that that was put up by mistake and that wasn't going to happen.
That's a joke, innit?
And then they put it in place.
Wow. I've never seen any government U-turn so much on so much. as this government. It's almost like they put something out there, see what the reaction was. All right, we're getting blasted for this. All right, we'll do the other one.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, everyone likes this. All right, we'll stick with that. There was no like. It was they were completely reactive to all of this. There was no proper planning in place or anything, was it? They dealt with everything literally. It felt like on the day. Mm-hmm. Oh, we'll do it today. Was it Tuesday? All right, deal with abortion today. How do we find out what the best thing to do is? I don't know. Tweet something and let's see what everyone says.
Basically, yeah, we found out because they just updated their website. But they have all the evidence to show that it's safe, it's efficient.
Mm-hmm.
This is coming from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, from BPAS and ourselves, from MSI Choices.
Yeah.
Everyone who provides abortion, who works in the sector, can see that it works, it's safe, it's effective, and that it actually provides service for a lot of people who couldn't access it before.
Yeah.
So to revoke it just doesn't make any sense.
Is there a petition online or anything like that?
There's no petition, but we are encouraging people to email their MP in their local area to ask them to keep it.
Okay. Right, well, there's a link to email your MP link, which we'll put in the description on this. Yeah? Yeah, we'll do that.
We have a link for that.
Brilliant. Do you have a link for that?
We do, yeah.
Yeah, we send it us?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I do remember the email your MP link, but yeah, if you can send it us, even better. Brilliant. So what else do you guys do at BPAS?
So as well as providing abortions and doing a lot of kind of research into sexual and reproductive health, we're also going to be launching our new fertility treatment centre this year.
Okay.
So it's only in London to begin with. Obviously it's going to be serviced in the whole of UK.
Yeah.
And we will be kind of running the gamut of the full fertility treatment services. So it will be kind of egg collection, sperm collection, IVF. We're also going to be preserving fertility for trans patients before they medically transition.
So explain what you mean by that.
So if people medically transition, the hormones that they take can kind of change their fertility.
So for example, if a woman is going to become a man, but they want to keep the ability to have a child in the future, they can freeze their eggs basically.
Yeah.
But then would they have to get a surrogate for them eggs? If they were to medically transition? Potentially,
it depends on who their partner is and what kind of family setup they're looking for in the future.
Right. But the drugs essentially the drugs or whatever the procedure is to transition could affect your ability to give birth or have a child in the future.
Yeah, so we're making sure that they have those options in the future. Yeah. What we essentially want to do is kind of widen out pregnancy choices and kind of family choices for everyone, so that because it's not just,
so it's more inclusive all around.
Exactly,
basically.
It's not just cis women who need it, it's not just straight couples who need help with IVF and stuff like that. It's everyone. And we really want to make it available to everyone.
And I think it's good that as a society we're kind of embracing diversity a bit more, a lot more than we used to. And everyone's different, and I suppose within that everyone has their own rights to be different, but also the rights to live a life as they want to live it. So I think it's good that there's charities and organisations being able to provide a service like that. I don't think it'll be happening in Texas though.
I don't think it'll be happening there.
No, I don't. Sam, thank you very much.
Thank you.